Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Drake C. Toll, Locked On Big 12 with us today. Drake, realignment popping back up, and we're going to talk a ton about it today. Man, there's some concern, I feel like, within a certain fan base, and I want to get your take. I want us to talk about it a little bit. Is Miami the Will Smith gift right now where he's looking around and there's no furniture, there's no family? What about me? Why does nobody want me? Is Miami in some kind of danger right now? Is there fear? Is it real concern? What are the thoughts with Miami and conference realignment?
Yeah, the Realignment Insider inside the Big 12 on X has been very confident that Miami will be left off the board when the Big 10 and the SEC decide to go hunting in realignment and expansion. Now, TJ, this all starts with North Carolina. And the news this last week that North Carolina is actively exploring an out from the ACC, likely to go to the SEC. That's exactly what they want. And I don't think Miami has that liberty to go to the SEC. And the further we get, the less I'm sure they have the liberty to go to the Big Ten. Now, we've heard that the Big Ten and the SEC likely want to stop at 20. That's kind of the magic number. For the Big Ten, they'll leave a slot open for Notre Dame. So really, they want 3 new schools in this whole shakeup. And for that conference, those 3 schools could very well be a Virginia or a Duke, maybe build a basketball powerhouse, and maybe they go get the Clemson or Florida State. And for the SEC, we've heard North Carolina. They may stop at 18, actually. North Carolina being in the fold for them, and I'm sure that will extend to a Florida State or a Clemson as well. And what you boil it down to is, as you kind of go down these brands, and remember, North Carolina, Virginia, really good academic institutions, and the Big Ten looks at that, and the SEC looking at regionality. I'm looking at the SEC. I'm hearing from sources that the market overlap and redundancy is a reason they wouldn't want Miami. They already have the Florida Gators. They would be attractive by Florida State. That's going to be a match that I think the two could consider, the SEC and Florida State. The game day experience is not one the SEC is impressed with. Inconsistent on-field performance the last 2 decades. Miami was super rich in championships 20 years ago, but as that kind of waned, the SEC doesn't look at it as a viable option to join their conference and boost the league in football. For the Big Ten, you're looking at the academic profile. The whole deal is the AAU membership. Miami recently gained that, but they don't have a long-standing tradition of academic prowess, and for some reason, the Big Ten is still valuing that. The competition for the Florida market. The Big Ten, if they were to go with Florida State, I don't think they want to bring Miami in there right after them to compete against one another in that conference. And you look at brand value, I just don't know if the Big Ten is completely on board with what Miami gives you. Who is then? That's the Big 12. So as we look at, and we already had a conversation last week with North Carolina out of the fold of the ACC, Clemson, Florida State, Miami likely want to follow suit. I'm sure Louisville and Pitt and folks will explore between now and 2035 trying to get out of the ACC. When that day comes, the closer we get, I fear everything's pointing toward Miami being left off the table by the Power 2 and the Power 3, including the Big 12 and a Big 12 that has Miami within it.
Yeah, so I don't think anything's impossible. I will tell you, the folks that I speak with at Miami who are somewhat connected, I don't want to say that they're, in the meetings of the trustees and things like that, right? Like they can happen behind closed doors because they're a private university. There is a lot of confidence on Miami's side. Just me talking, we haven't even talked about this off air. If you're feeling tired, sluggish, or just a little bit off, low testosterone could be the culprit. Emerald Medical is here to help you reclaim your energy with hormone replacement therapy. I see the analytics. I see you guys' ages. I know that you're mostly men watching this. Use our code CFA for a free consultation and to save on your journey to feeling like the new you again. Their owner, Chris, good buddy of mine, huge college football fan, will get you personalized care that you can trust. Go to emeraldhrt.com. Use code CFA. Doesn't sign you up for anything. You don't have to put a credit card in. You'll get a free consultation, take it or leave it, and hopefully get back to feeling like the real you. Then they will land in the Big Ten, right? And maybe that's false confidence. Maybe it's not. Listen, I can put all the rivalry aside. I can put all the hatred aside. Would I like Miami to get left behind? Absolutely. Just as a fan of Florida State, sure. I think it'd be hilarious. I have a hard time when the rubber really meets the road. Now, I agree with all the things on the SEC. I don't think they're a fit for the SEC. I think the SEC would far and away take Florida State before they took Miami. And I think Florida State, for different reasons, fits in in kind of both categories, and maybe even has a leg up on them in both against both conferences. Really, even all three. Like I think the Big 12 would take Florida State if that was possible over Miami. So listen, I'll put all the bias aside though. When the rubber really meets the road, I don't know that I could see them taking Virginia over a Miami. Like I think in theory it sounds good. Oh well, this and that, more regionality. If Florida State, especially if Florida State was to go to the SEC, then I think the Big Ten would really want to pounce on that Florida market, and they fit the mold of a Big Ten school, private, smaller. They kind of make sense in some regards there, but I just have a hard time, even with all my biases and maybe what I would want. I have a hard time the rubber really meeting the road and Miami not being in. I think their next couple of years of performance could also impact that. We've talked about the inconsistency, and any Miami fan will tell you how inconsistent they've really been over the last 2 decades. I do think that if they can stack a few more seasons and really show that they can compete, a lot of people forget that Miami's season ended poorly last year in the bowl game and in November. But I mean, they were a lock for the playoff at one point. I mean, they were number 7 in the country and had trips to Georgia Tech and Syracuse on the schedule. Like nobody thought that they were going to drop a game at Syracuse and also lose to Georgia Tech and then lose their bowl game. They were the team behind Alabama when SMU snuck in because of the Clemson win in the championship. So they were right there on the doorstep. I think if they can continue that, because I do think Miami is a national brand, right? For some reason, I think they're a bigger national brand than they are a regional or local brand, just because I don't think people in Miami really care. Small fan base, but because of what they did in the 80s and 90s, similar to Notre Dame, they are a national brand. And so I think when the rubber meets the road, I know that different people talk to different folks. I think Miami will land in the Big Ten. That seems like what's most likely. But if for whatever reason they're not there, I think they either stay in the ACC or go to the Big 12. I can't see the SEC as being a possibility, but I don't know. I'm not willing to move off them probably landing in the Big Ten if I had to call it now.
So let me ask you this. If you're the SEC, you already have Florida, so you think, okay, let's not battle the Gators with adding Florida State and having some interstate rivalry or crossover. If you're the SEC, and that's Greg Sankey's mentality, which we know his vetting process is tighter than any other conference. He doesn't want to add anybody. Florida State's not everybody and anybody, but the Big Ten might be a nicer landing spot for Florida State right now. If that's the case, would there be any value for the Big Ten to say, okay, we also want Miami with Florida State? Because I could only see that going wrong for the Tony Petitti in that conference.
I don't know. You look at, even the SEC, how many states are there where they're doubled up? And Tennessee's one, Alabama's one, Texas is one.
Tennessee's kind of one.
Yeah. But it's still there.
A little bit. Yes.
Mississippi is one. So you've got at least
Texas,
4,
yeah, Texas,
right?
For sure,
Yeah. So, not LSU, sorry. Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Tennessee, kind of, right? You've got 4 already. Right. So, and then if they were to go get a Clemson, which I think fits better in the SEC than in the Big Ten, not that they couldn't land in the Big Ten, but they need at 5. So I don't know. I think there's this narrative out there of like, oh man, they would never want to add another program from a state they're already in. And it's like, why? Why would you say that? Like there's 4 or 5 of them already. And then it's kind of the same thing with the Big Ten, isn't it? You think about where you think about Indiana has a couple. You think about Michigan has a couple. You think about California now has a couple. So I don't know that it would be the worst thing. I don't think it would compete. I think they would want to. I think from the Big Ten's perspective, what are the pros for Miami? If they can continue to be relevant in football, obviously that's the biggest pro, right? Bring in eyeballs. The large metropolis that is the geographic location of Miami, I think is very attractive to away fans, right? We all know the jokes about Miami. Oh, they don't pack out the stadium unless it's a big game. Well, they're going to pack out that stadium when Notre Dame comes to town this week, right? And imagine if you were putting matchups like Miami, Michigan, or Miami, Ohio State, or Miami, Nebraska, or Miami, Florida State. Would you want to continue to capitalize on that rivalry? Because Florida State, Florida, and Miami end up in 3 different conferences. One of those rivalries is dying. Either Florida State's with Miami or Florida State's with Florida. So I guess my thought for the Big Ten is we could capitalize on Miami being good at football, right? Which they haven't shown that they've been able to do consistently, right? So we're a little early on just saying that is a for sure thing. The rivalry with Florida State, the metropolis that is Miami. You are getting an AAU accredited member, even though they are new into that, but you are kind of staying within your vein there. So I think there are some pros, right? Do they outweigh the cons of Miami's inconsistency or double dipping in Florida, going after other markets? Possibly, but we talked about this. What does USC matter to LA compared to Miami versus the Canes, right? Well, they're third or fourth, right? After the Lakers and the Dodgers and, the Dolphins and everything else that they've got going on down there. Messy at this point.
Yeah.
So I do think that there are some similarities there. I think that you could maybe make some of the same arguments you made for USC with Miami of have their better days past. Yeah, maybe. But I think there are pros for the Big Ten to go after it. And I don't think double dipping in the state would really impact either conference. It's, looking at Florida State to the SEC or Miami to the Big Ten, if that's where Florida State landed.
Yeah, the hope is for the Big 12 that those cons for the Big 10 and the SEC outweigh the pros, and ultimately Miami is left off of their table. And I do think if the Big 12 is spearheaded by a successful BYU and Texas Tech and Miami and Louisville, that they're still in the conversation for consistent college football playoff spots and big brands.
Miami could be. No Miami fan wants to hear this. No Miami fan, I still think Miami lands in the Big Ten. So before you guys get mad in the comments, get mad at Dre. Lock on Big 12 is where you can go complain in the comments. I think Miami lands in the Big Ten. However, if they were to land in the Big 12 with their resources, because they don't. Nobody's turning away the TV money from the Big Ten or the SEC, right? But with their resources that they have, they could Clemson that conference. Like they could absolutely, in theory, they'd have to be more consistent. That would be a big selling point, I think, to them is, look, there are other big time brands here that also have money like Texas Tech, and we talk about BYU, we talk about other things, but at Miami's resources are pretty elite. And if they, and where the talent is, right? You think about the talent that's down there in South Florida. You wouldn't be competing against the Florida State in conference for guys. I mean, you still compete with them in general for recruits. But Miami, I think, could go to the Big 12. And shoot, what if they were there for 5 years and everything went smashingly, right, for Miami? Could then they make a move, right? Could they hop a couple of times? Not that the Big 12 wants to be looked at as a stepping stone or anything like that, but if you're Miami and you go and win that thing 4 out of the next 6 years and you're in the playoff every other year, could you maybe leapfrog to somewhere else down the road? And, that would be the onus would be on them to do it.
If we had all the time in the world, we could divulge. But I am just confident Miami would come in the Big 12, immediately go 9-0, and then finish 9-4. It's just the way it would go.
I'll say this, yeah, their Novembers under Mario have left something to be desired. They have they've not done well there, and so they get the tough test with Notre Dame and Florida State to start the year this year. So we'll see how they do, but.